upon this information?
Well, as I think you already said, I thought I was an adopted child. And so I was 23 and I was about to be married. And I said to my fiancé, I can't marry you. I don't know who I am. I don't know who my father is. I don't know who my mother is. And I want children and you want children and I know nothing about me. And he said, very lovingly, he said, well, I know everything there is to know about you. And I said, you do? And he said, yes, it's common knowledge. Your father is Clark Gable.
The man kissing her goodbye has the most famous face in America, and the girl has no idea he's her father. He leans down, just for a second, the king of Hollywood bending to kiss a 15-year-old nobody in a modest house. His mustache brushes her forehead. It's not a lover's kiss. It's not quite a father's kiss either. It's something in between. Too soft for a stranger, too distant for blood. When the door closes behind him, her mother is already pretending it was nothing. Decades later, that single confusing kiss will come back again and again in therapy sessions, in a memoir, in a lifetime of questions. Because that man was Clark Gable, and this is the story of the daughter he kissed once and denied forever. The most brutal part of this story isn't the secret itself, it's how many adults had to lie consistently and creatively to keep one teenage girl in the dark. To understand how a child could stand inches from her father and be denied the basic dignity of knowing his name, you have to start with the quiet catastrophe of 1935 on a frozen set in the wilderness with two movie stars who could not afford a scandal. The cameras on The Call of the Wild are rolling, but the real drama is happening when they cut. Loretta Young is 22, devoutly Catholic, ambitious, and already famous for playing pure, fragile heroines. Clark Gable is 34, married, macho, and Hollywood's hottest box office draw. The studio publicity machine insists they're just colleagues, but according to several biographers, something else happens between takes, a brief affair, or, as some accounts more darkly imply, a sexual encounter that Loretta did not fully control. What's not in dispute is the consequence. She leaves the location shoot feeling sick, exhausted, and pregnant. Nothing terrifies a 1930s Catholic movie star more than an unwed pregnancy. Here is the trap. Loretta's entire career is built on her image as a virtuous young lady. Clark's is built on being desirable, but not dishonorable. Married, charming, the rugged romantic lead. Hollywood's production code has just tightened. The town is anxious. Studio bosses handle indiscretions quietly, if at all. An abortion is whispered as an option. For a Catholic like Loretta, according to later accounts, it's unthinkable. The baby must live, but so must the illusion. The solution they come up with is simple, elegant, and morally devastating. Loretta vanishes from public view under the pretext of a prolonged vacation and illness. She goes to Europe for a time, then to a rented house away from Hollywood's glare. There, in 1935, she gives birth in secret to a baby girl. Her name is Judy. Baby Judy is not celebrated in fan magazines. There are no proud father quotes, no staged hospital photographs. Instead, almost as soon as she arrives, she's erased. According to Judy's later recollections, she is placed in a Catholic orphanage, her existence filed away under charity, not kinship. This is the first dark price of Clark Gable's fame. A newborn girl is treated, on paper, as though she belongs to no one. The next move is even colder. Months later, Loretta Young rescues a little girl from that same orphanage. The press release writes itself. The virtuous Catholic star, moved by faith and compassion, has decided to adopt a child. Photographers are invited. Smiles are rehearsed. Loretta walks out of the orphanage holding her own biological daughter, but publicly she is a generous adoptive mother, not a woman who slept with a married man. To her colleagues and fans, it's a charming story. To the infant in her arms, it's the moment her identity is sealed inside a lie. From the beginning, Judy grows up in a house designed to hide her. She remembers a glamorous mother, a revolving door of visitors, and a lingering sensation that something doesn't quite add up. The Young household is Catholic, image-conscious, and controlled. Loretta is both loving and distant, pulled between maternal instinct and a perfectionism sharpened by fear. If the real origin story leaks, both she and Gable could face public condemnation. So Judy is told a script. You're adopted. Your real mother couldn't keep you. I chose you. It's a beautiful lie, polished until it sounds generous. It covers everyone's sins, except the emotional scar it presses into a child who already senses she's being kept at arm's length from the truth. The mirror becomes Judy's earliest enemies. By the time she is old enough to study her own face, she's also old enough to see Clark Gable's face in magazines, posters, and movie screens. She doesn't know their names belong in the same sentence, but the physical echoes are hard to miss. The long jawline, the ears that seem just a bit too prominent. Friends and even strangers, according to Judy's later accounts, sometimes joke, "You look like Clark Gable." It's meant as flattery. It lands like a riddle. Loretta hears those comments too, and here is a detail almost everyone misses. For years, she insists Judy's ears be pinned back surgically, an attempt Judy eventually realizes to erase the most obvious sign of her father. The louder the resemblance, the harsher the silence. Inside the house, any mention of Gable is careful and limited. He's a co-star, an acquaintance, maybe a friend, never more. Outside in Hollywood circles, rumors swirl quietly. People do the math. The call of the wild shoot, the timing of Loretta's illness, the mysteriously adopted child who looks like Gable with a bow in her hair. But this is a town where powerful men's reputations are currency. Studio heads have no interest in shaming their box office king. Gossip whispers, but no one says it straight to the child's face. Instead, Judy grows up in that most damaging of environments, one where everybody seems to know something about you, except you. Clark Gable, meanwhile, is living like a de facto general. As Judy is learning to walk and speak, Clark is consolidating his place as the king of Hollywood. His marriage to his second wife, Rhea Langham, disintegrates, and by 1939 he's rushing off to marry Carla Lombard, the love of his life, just before Gone with the Wind cements his immortality as Rhett Butler. To the public, Gable is the ultimate masculine ideal, roguish, honorable enough, effortlessly in control. To studios, he is a product too valuable to tarnish with an illegitimate child scandal. To Judy, he is a face on a screen, a man she admires without realizing she's watching her own genetic future stride across the frame. The cruel irony here is simple. The more beloved he becomes, the more unthinkable it is for him to admit her. Stop here for a moment and look at this from Loretta's side. She is a working actress in a hypocritical system. Men are allowed affairs, women are punished. If she had publicly claimed Gable as her father, what would have happened? According to period norms and the power imbalance, it's easy to imagine she would be branded immoral, difficult, unmarketable. He might get a slap on the wrist, a few spicy headlines, then another leading role. So she chooses survival. She chooses silence. She chooses to frame her child as a rescue project rather than a consequence of love or coercion. It is not a malicious decision, it is a protective one. But here is the trap. When protection requires a lifetime of denial, the person it protects least is the child at the center. The war years and their aftermath add another layer of distance. Clark Gable enlists after Carla Lombard's death in a plane crash, devastated and seeking some form of atonement. He serves in the U.S. Army Air Forces, returns older, harder, and by many accounts emotionally shut down in certain ways. He marries again, then again. His public persona shifts from dashing romantic lead to older, rugged figure, a survivor, but also a man increasingly guarded. During all of this, there is still no open acknowledgement of Judy, no financial support under his name, no public association.
Some biographers suggest discreet, indirect assistance may have reached Loretta and Judy from Gable's side, but nothing concrete enough to call fatherhood. For Judy, the absence becomes its own kind of presence, a hole you build your personality around. The first time Judy meets Clark Gable, she isn't introduced as her daughter. She's introduced as a girl who should be honored to be in the same room. She's a teenager now, about 15, living with the long-term effects of half-truths. She knows she's adopted. She knows her life has always felt like a performance she's slightly miscast in. Loretta is successful, busy, often gone. The emotional message is clear. Don't cause trouble. Don't ask too many questions. Be grateful.
Then, one day, the king of Hollywood shows up. Imagine that moment through her eyes. You're a girl who has always felt slightly outside your own family. A superstar walks into your living room, a man your mother knows, a man whose face you've seen on screens 10 feet high. He pays attention to you. He asks questions. He's warm in a way your own mystery never has been. You don't understand why your stomach flips when he looks at you, not romantically, but with a strange, searching softness. According to Judy's later account, they talk briefly. Nothing earth-shattering is said. Then it's time for him to go. At the door, he leans down and kisses her on the forehead. It's gentle, too gentle, a boundaryless act with no label. He leaves. No one explains. The scene closes like a curtain being yanked shut. This is the kiss that gives the documentary its title, the kiss that makes sense only in hindsight. At the time, Judy files it away under unresolved mysteries. Why did a superstar care enough to visit her? Why was her mother's energy so strained, almost brittle around him? And why did that kiss feel like something important she wasn't being allowed to name? For Clark Gable, it's one quiet visit in a life full of bigger scenes. He walks back into the world where he's adored on sight, where his face on a marquee is enough to stop traffic. For Judy, it becomes the most intimate non-moment of her adolescence, a father touching his child like a stranger, because that's what everyone has agreed to make them. Here is the detail that turns that tender gesture into a kind of cruelty. He had the power, in that moment, to change everything. He could have said it, in private, with Loretta, with Judy, without fanfare. I am your father. Those 4 words would not have destroyed his career in the 1950s. Scandalous, perhaps. Manageable, almost certainly. Studios had weathered worse. He could have given her a name, a story that made emotional sense, even if the paperwork never caught up. Instead, he chose distance. Whether out of shame, out of loyalty to his current wife, out of fear of scandal, or simply out of habit, he left her unclaimed. To understand why that choice might have felt necessary to him, you have to look at the boy he used to be, long before he was the king. Clark Gable's own childhood was marked by instability and loss. He lost his mother as a baby. His father was harsh, restless, moving them from town to town, job to job. Clark grew up learning that survival meant adaptation. Be charming, be useful, be what people want, or be discarded. Hollywood simply paid him obscene amounts of money to keep doing what his childhood had already trained him for. Performance over vulnerability, image over intimacy, control over confession. Admitting to Judy would have required something his entire life had taught him to avoid, emotional exposure without a script. And so, the man who could cry on cue for cameras could not say, "I'm your father," when it mattered. Judy, denied the truth, tries instead to become the kind of person who finally makes sense. She follows her mother into acting, appearing on television, working inside the same industry that authored her confusion. She marries, has a child, and keeps functioning on top of a core wound she can't name, and sense of abandonment that is both specific and diffuse. She knows she's adopted, but the story never quite satisfies. Why do certain people in Hollywood react strangely around her? Why does some seem to know something about her face?
Like many people with buried trauma, she becomes good at coping and bad at connecting the dots. Outwardly competent, inwardly split. The truth, when it finally comes, is almost anticlimactic in its delivery and nuclear in its impact. Accounts vary on exactly how and when Judy first heard the rumor that Clark Gable might be her father. Some place it in her 20s, others in her 30s. It could have been a careless comment, a slip during an argument, or a trusted person finally deciding she deserved to know. However it arrived, the effect was the same. The world tilted. She confronts Loretta. This is the moment everything converges. The secret pregnancy, the orphanage, the adoptive fairy tale, the forehead kiss. And Loretta, after decades of silence, confirms it. Yes, Clark Gable was your biological father. This confession is not catharsis. It's a shattering. For Judy, decades of confusion rearrange themselves overnight. The jokes about her resemblance to Gable, the odd behavior of adults around her, the single strange visit when she was 15, everything locks into place. But the knowledge doesn't come with the thing she needed most, a living father to look in the eye and say, "I see you." Clark has already died in 1960 from a heart attack, long before she could ask him anything. What she gets instead is ghost fatherhood, proof of his paternity, stories about him, and the memory of that single, soft, insufficient kiss. Here is where the emotional cost becomes measurable in a different currency. Judy later describes feeling that she had never truly belonged anywhere, not in her family, not in Hollywood, not even fully in her own skin. Learning the truth doesn't erase that feeling, it explains it. She has been an unacknowledged heir to two incompatible legacies, Loretta's Catholic guilt and Clark's cinematic swagger. Both parents built careers on playing roles. Both used secrecy as survival. She, the child, inherited the confusion without consent. Instead of collapsing under it, she does something remarkable. She studies it. Judy Lewis becomes a psychotherapist. It's a career choice that almost writes itself from her biography. Who better to sit with other people's hidden pain than someone whose entire childhood was built on a secret? She specializes in family systems, in the ways people adapt to unspoken rules and unacknowledged truths. Her work is both professional and personal. In helping others decode their patterns, she slowly decodes her own. But there is one final act of disclosure she hasn't yet made, not just to clients, but to the world. In 1994, she publishes a memoir, Uncommon Knowledge. The title is a bitter joke. What happened to her was common knowledge in Hollywood circles for decades. Everyone knew, but no one said. In the book, she lays it all out. The secret birth, the orphanage, the staged adoption, the eerie resemblance to Gable, the forehead kiss, the delayed confession. She doesn't paint her mother or father as monsters. She paints them as trapped people whose choices trapped her in turn. The memoir finally brings the story into open daylight. The public, long enamored with Gable as a romantic hero, has to face an uncomfortable truth. The king of Hollywood allowed his throne to be built on a girl's lifelong confusion. Loretta Young's reaction to the memoir is complex and tells you everything about the era she came from. By some reports, she is hurt, defensive, embarrassed. In one late-life documentary, she is said to have used the word rape, or at least date rape, to describe the original encounter with Gable, suggesting she herself felt violated by an imbalance of power and coercion back in 1935. Whether or not that specific language was hers, the suggestion reframes the entire origin story, casting Loretta not simply as a sinner hiding her shame, but as a victim trying to survive in a predatory system. If that's true, then Judy's existence was born not only of passion, but of trauma, and the secrecy that followed was a misguided attempt to bury them both at once. Clark Gable is not alive to respond, to explain, to apologize, or to deny.
This is one of the bitter truths about cleaning up after legends. The dead cannot be cross-examined. We are left with their actions and their silences. Clark never publicly acknowledged Judy. He never commented on the rumors. He never gave an interview in which he took responsibility. His defenders might argue that he was a man of his time, operating under studio pressure, marietal obligations, and restrictive social codes. His critics point out that private acknowledgement was always an option, that he could have attended a birthday, written a letter, made time for a conversation when she was an adult. He did none of that. The man who could play complicated, emotionally available heroes on screen left one very real daughter to piece together her story without him. When you return to that image of the 15-year-old girl and the departing movie star, it lands differently now. We know what she didn't. We see the father in the angle of his head, the hesitation in his body language, the guilty tenderness in that single kiss. We see Loretta watching, heart pounding, hoping they both feel something but don't understand it too clearly. We see the walls lined with movie posters, the faces smiling down from their own mythology, while a quieter, truer story goes unspoken in the hallway. The kiss was not a blessing, it was a compromise, the most affection he could allow himself without risking his mask. There's a larger question underneath this one family tragedy. How many other children in that era and this one grew up as collateral damage to the image machines that sell us heroes? Clark Gable's fame did not just make him rich and adored, it made his secrets too valuable to expose. Loretta Young's reputation did not just secure her roles, it made her too afraid to admit the most natural thing in the world, that she was a mother. The studios built universes of romance and honor while quietly benefiting from the lies their stars told off-screen. And one girl, Judy Lewis, spent half her life walking around inside a role she hadn't agreed to play, the adopted daughter, not the hidden heir. By the time Judy dies in 2011, she, in a sense, has raised herself. She has become an actress, a therapist, an author, a mother. She has taken the shards of a fractured story and assembled them into something coherent enough to hand to the world and say, "This is what your favorite myths cost me." She never gets to confront her father. She never hears him name her name with recognition. But she names herself, and in doing so, she breaks the generational pattern of secrecy. That is the quiet victory buried inside the scandal. She transforms a private wound into public language so that other people raised on lies might feel less alone. In the end, when we look back at Clark Gable, not as Rhett Butler, not as the king of Hollywood, but as a man who once kissed his own daughter on the forehead and then walked out, we're forced to admit something uncomfortable. He was not ruined by success, he was enabled by it. Enabled to avoid responsibility, to lean on silence, to let the studios and the social codes of his day excuse what a simpler, smaller life might have made unignorable. The dark price women paid for his fame in this story is obvious. Loretta's decades of guilt, Judy's decades of confusion. But there's another price too, the part of Clark Gable that never had to grow up enough to face them. So the next time you see that legendary smirk on an old movie poster, it's worth asking yourself, what did this smile cost, and who paid the bill?